I think we're live.
Oh, my mic's not on.
Oh, put your mic on.
Let me plug this in.
Yeah.
I'll just do it like this today.
Hey, it picked it up pretty well, though.
There we are. I did it.
Excellent. Terrific.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good day to all of you wonderful people out there. Right?
That's right. What she said.
So it's another live stream.
Yes, it is. Yes,
We love the day that we do live streams, don't
yeah.
we?
This is the last one in Asia. So
then we'll be reporting from
it will
another
be-
time zone.
Yeah, that's right. And so the times might change at that point.
But if they do, which they probably will, we will let you know ahead of time, obviously. And I don't know how you found out about this live stream. Perhaps you're a subscriber. If you are, that's amazing. Thank you. Otherwise, you can probably find us on, you definitely can find us on Instagram and Facebook. So however you found us, thank you.
It's very
Welcome.
searchable, the name, Explearning.
It is.
Very searchable. Yeah. But yeah, it'll be, we had a nice time here.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, really enjoyed it. We're going back where it's a little colder. That's all right.
To brave the cold.
Yeah, but it'll be fun.
Talk about the Wim Hof method.
I know.
You can do the Wim Hof method.
I'll get all the cold showers I want.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So what's our topic today?
So we're talking about toxic communication and bullying.
Got it.
And bullying is something that is pervasive throughout one's life. I think it's not just something that happens, on the playground or at school or
you
when
think of
you're
it as that.
younger.
You think of it as, oh yeah, bullying. I remember that from like second grade, fifth grade.
Right. Like, oh yeah, kindergarten.
Right.
But it's not like that. It happens at all ages, right? And in different departments, in different fields, in different areas of sort of like industries or.
And I feel like it's almost, it's harder to detect when you're older because you're not on guard for it. Right? When you're a kid, you're sort of always looking for the bully and trying to determine who is the bully.
Like,
and
spot the bully.
Spot the bully. And, keep your distance. But as you get older, you don't expect it in the same way. And so it can kind of surprise you.
Yeah.
And they get more sophisticated when they get older.
Yeah, they smarten up, right?
Yeah. So you don't even know you're being bullied.
So we want to talk about that because, it is something to be aware of. And there are ways of addressing it without, losing your mind over it or losing your sense of self, like doing something that seems so antithetical to your authentic expression that, it's just like, why did I respond that way? Sort of reaction to it. So I think that, we'll talk about some ways of reducing the effects of bullying on oneself. And again, tying it back to Stoicism. Last week, I think it was when we talked about it.
I feel like we should just tie every episode to Stoicism.
You know what? The reality is, right? You're right. The reality is that this channel, right, is all about equipping ourselves with the tools we need to succeed in our everyday lives. It's not just about the big moments, on screen, in public, on camera, or, in public speaking events, but it's all of the in-between that makes up our everyday, right? And I think that a lot of the ways of sort of dealing with the everyday highs and lows is through the inward, doing the inner work of introspection, inner voice, intra-personal communication. Yeah, and that's very much tied to
the domain of Stoicism.
Yeah.
I remember your father, who's a what do you call it? A dedicated fan of Explearning, and we're very appreciative of his support. He mentioned that we should also make sure we include
mom too.
And mom, of course.
Well,
mom is probably the most. I challenge any other fan to get as engaged as her mother, because her mother is incredible. But he was just saying, make sure we also give some of the Greek Stoics.
It's true, yeah.
We've been talking a lot about the Roman Stoics.
So shout out to Epictetus and Zeno. Zeno was the founder of Stoicism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think it was, so basically the way Stoicism sort of came to light was through, I think it comes from porch, because Zeno, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but he would, he would spread the word on his porch. And so his pupils would come and listen, and he'd be, doling out these nuggets of wisdom that
on the porch. I love it.
Stoicism on the porch.
Yeah.
And Stoicism means like,
so the world was great back then. Can you imagine? You could just, you're walking home and you get a little porch philosophy as you walk back.
Right. That's what it is.
Right.
That's what
Forget Instagram and all these things. YouTube. Yeah. I'm on my porch philosophy.
Yeah. Maybe that's what we should do. Huh?
Yeah. So this is a little porch philosophy.
So that's kind of cool, right?
But it's relevant. It's relevant. I mean, Stoicism, I think, does have a lot to do with what we're going to discuss today with bullying. Because,
of course.
As I'm sure you're going to jump into, bullying has a lot to do with. Bullying is sort of one of those things where it is bullying if you let it be bullying.
I love that.
Right?
Say it again.
Yeah.
Say it again, Greg. That's so good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It is bullying if you let it be bullying, right? Otherwise, it's just someone saying something silly. Yeah.
It goes back to that I'm rubber, you're glue, right? If you don't let it stick to you, then it's not going to affect you as much or at all, even. Right?
Totally. Yeah. So where would you like to jump in on this?
Well, first of all, I think we have to say, obviously, like, bullying is not okay, right? It's absolutely unacceptable behavior. It should by no means be tolerated or condoned. So that's an issue, right? But I think the first thing we have to sort of allow ourselves to remember is that bullying doesn't have that much to do with us. Like, let's say we're being bullied, as it does with the person who is bullying. A lot of times, right? I'm going to say that saying again, hurt people, right? So basically, I would say most of the time, the person who is bullying, the bully, is going through a lot of stuff, whether they know it or not, and they have their own issues that they have to sort out.
So that is hurt people, meaning the people who are hurt.
Yes.
Are the people who
are hurting,
who then
others.
In turn hurt others.
Yes.
Got it.
Whether it's because they don't know any other sort of reality or form of communication or communication style, right? Maybe like toxic communication is the only type of communication that they know. I'm thinking more.
That's a good point, right? If that's all you've been exposed to, then
right, and
that's sort of what you default to.
Yeah, because I mean, if you don't know anything else apart from that, then okay, well.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe it's like, a little kid, sort of like a second grader, being the big bully or the small bully, because it doesn't have to be a big bully, who's sort of doing that. I forgot what I was going to
say. They may not even know that they're a bully either, right? So true. Particularly if then it's a situation where they just are picking up the communication styles that they've been exposed to. They may not even realize they're being the bully. For them, they're just sort of acting in a way that is expressing some inner turmoil, right? Some insecurity.
Right. So going back to sort of it having less to do with you as it does with them. So I think realizing that, like, oh, they must be having like a rough day, a rough life, or whatever.
A rough life.
I don't know.
I don't
know. But like, I think it's really important to be cognizant of that so that you make it less about a personal attack, even though it 100% feels like it, right? If someone calls you a name or says something really critical and not constructive in any way, shape, or form, then I think, it's hard to separate that from you as a person. But I think remembering that is really helpful.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think the other part of it is being able to distinguish between what is bullying versus what is just feedback.
Like constructive criticism.
Yeah, and what is just, someone being assertive. I think there is a bit of, right?
That's interesting.
There's, I remember, the reason I brought this up, so I have a little brother, he's 10 years old, and so he had a birthday party, and they were bowling. And,
that was a fun party.
Yeah. And I was, I at some point, one of the kids had a ball that I said it looked too big for him. I'm like, oh, that ball looks a little too big for you. Maybe go
heavy
for something
too,
smaller.
right? Sometimes
Yeah, too heavy,
they're
right?
too
The
heavy.
bowling balls can be heavy. If you've done any bowling, you know that you have a choice of ball sizes. And this kid was clearly choosing, I think was trying to show off and choose a really heavy ball. And it was not working out for him on the scoreboard.
Oh god.
So I was encouraging him
remember
to potentially choose a lighter ball. And he's like, hey, don't be a bully.
Oh yeah, I remember
You
that.
remember
It
that?
was totally
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we were wondering, we contemplated on that sort of afterwards. And we were like, he probably didn't know, like people just throw out these words that they don't fully understand, especially children, right?
Right.
So it was obviously not a case of bullying, but that was really funny.
Right. And so the reason I bring it up is because, I think identifying what bullying is important, because once you know that it's what it is, right, then you can adjust your reaction accordingly. But advice, suggestions, that's not bullying. If it's conveyed in a polite way, if the
Totally.
intention is to help you, that's certainly not bullying.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone being assertive and saying this is the way it should be, I think sometimes can be bullying, right? If they're being a little too pushy and forcing you to do something you're not comfortable with.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when someone is saying something because they feel that the way they're suggesting is important, it's worth listening to. So I think getting familiar, it's just getting familiar with. What would you say? I'll posit my thought, and then maybe you can weigh in on your view. I would say that it is bullying if it's done to benefit no one other than the person who's speaking, right? Or
like if they
doing the bullying.
if they clearly derive pleasure from doing that.
Well, that might be something separate. I'm just saying, if someone's telling you to do something and it's not for your good or the good of everyone in the room, that already is a red flag, right?
Okay, right, sure.
If it's more so to benefit themselves, or if it's done for no clear purpose at all, right? So I think bullying is something where there's not a clear purpose for why they're doing it, and it's done in a way that's making you feel uncomfortable. That, I think, for me, maybe is how I would define bullying.
Yeah, I think in the simplest way of understanding it, it's anything that is clearly hurtful. So I'm thinking like name calling.
Right, intentionally hurtful.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That is like not even open to interpretation because, we talk about interpreting things in the best way possible. But if it's, at least the way I think of it, if it's, thinking like name calling, I'm thinking of comments that, are said out loud, but clearly about that person in their presence.
Right.
It's like obvious, right?
The harm is intended, essentially.
Exactly. And there's obviously no, constructive criticism that you could pull from that or glean from.
Yeah.
I
think that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And when you think about sort of why it's done, it kind of makes sense from an evolutionary perspective.
That's interesting.
Right? Because as bully, I typically view bullies as people who have, in some way, some sort of insecurity.
Yes.
Right? And if you're feeling insecure, the best way to make sure that people aren't looking at you is to direct attention to someone else. Right? And so what a bully can do is ensure that they don't become the victim by instead turning someone else into the victim.
That's right.
And if they know that they can turn someone else into a victim,
eyes are on them and not on
you're right, eyes are on the victim and not the bully.
Yeah.
And so I think it's almost a preemptive defensive mechanism.
That's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
To divert attention away from the bully toward someone else. And frankly, I often don't think they care. They probably, what they do is choose the person who's most vulnerable.
Right. And who seems isolated and not like sort of like a loner, somebody who doesn't have like a support system. That's what research shows.
Right. Someone who won't defend them.
Yeah. So
who doesn't have anyone to defend them. Yeah.
So one of the ways of sort of standing up to bullies is actually having your own support system and having at least one other person, just one person, just one friend that can really vouch for you, have your back, and at least for you, you feel that you have somebody who's with you, who's on your team, basically.
Yeah, that's right. I think, yeah, you got at something important, because we've been talking about sort of how do you deal with it mentally, but then there are also some ways to sort of prevent it from happening in the first place. So I think there's two parts to the solution. One is, how do you cope with it? But the other part is, how do you avoid an environment or a scenario where you're at risk of being the victim? So I think we could probably talk about both of those.
I think so. So
right.
So sometimes you can't avoid it, but one of the ways you can sort of diffuse the situation, I think, is to laugh about it. So like if somebody is making fun of you and it was said in jest or not said in jest, but either way, it was clearly an ad hominem, an attack on the person, then you can sort of, poke fun at it. Yeah, oh, that's so funny. I was just thinking the same thing. Sort of like self-deprecating humor.
Right.
Because once you show that that's not going to bother you, that you can laugh about it just as easily as that they're trying to like poke fun at you for it, then it just it disarms them.
Well, totally. I mean, if the intention was to insult you, to make you feel inadequate or whatever, and you turn it into something that's funny.
Yeah, you make light of it.
You've completely invalidated the attack.
Exactly. It doesn't hurt you. It doesn't bother you.
That's very effective. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you do that, the bully also realizes this is someone who knows how to deflect my attack.
Yeah.
I'm going to send it elsewhere.
Right. I'm not going to mess with that person anymore.
Right. And I really like that solution too, because it's not aggressive. It's not pushing back. It's not like I got punched, now you get punched. It's more so I got punched, but I caught the fist,
Yeah.
And it's
now I'm like high-fiving.
Put a friendship bracelet on it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. It's just it's not, he doesn't feel like an attack back. It's just like, oh, okay, that sort of fell flat. Probably not worth trying again.
Yeah. Now I think it also depends on your personality. Some people are innately, funny, humorous people, and also maybe self-deprecative, but that doesn't come naturally to everyone. So if you feel like you have nothing, you don't know how to laugh about it, absolutely don't try to give a comeback or anything, because you don't want to add oil to the flame. But I think another way, and this is sort of, I think, my favorite, but it's the hardest, I think, to try to befriend the bully, if that makes sense. Or if you can't befriend them, then at least you can try to show them kindness.
Right.
If possible.
Yeah. That's also really challenging, but I agree. So the first one is to be witty, which is tough, right? Some people can do that on the spot, others can't. The second one is,
I personally can't do that.
Right.
Like I find it, I find that extremely challenging. Like I'll laugh it off if I can, but I'm not gonna
It's like the guy in The Good Place, right? Where he was
Chidi?
No,
who can't decide. We're watching that right now.
It's a really good show.
So funny.
On was it Netflix?
I think so.
Called The Good Place.
It's really funny.
And this is the orchestrator, the architect.
The guy who Ted Danson.
And he's dealing with his arch nemesis, and his arch nemesis insults him, and is like this witty guy. And so the architect tries to get back at him. He's like, I can't come up with anything. I'll come up with something witty in the next 30 minutes, and then I'm going to tell you, and you're going to really feel it.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I'm imagining.
And it's like totally a moot point.
And it's like not a
funny
comeback
at all.
whatsoever.
It's not a comeback. It's not hurtful.
Not everyone's good at comebacks.
Yeah.
Which is why your second solution is a good one. Is if you're not good at comebacks, then I think, like you're saying, a good solution is to be
kind.
Yeah. Kind.
Show them compassion.
Yeah.
And that, to me, like that's sort of like how I operate. Like it's easier for me to do that. And,
yeah. Was it, I think Benjamin Franklin did this. I can't remember who, it was some historical figure, but his solution for dealing with people this is for people that don't like you, but I think it works.
I just want to say one thing.
Okay.
Sorry, because I'm just thinking of the term like toxic people. I just don't like that, right? Because it's really toxic behavior. It's toxic communication. So sorry, just
Very
wanted to say that.
very good point.
Yeah.
Which I think we hear a lot of. We hear the word toxic people a lot.
Yeah, that's just
I find, first of all, toxic is an extremely strong word. I
It's
try to
strong.
avoid using it. But I agree. You don't apply it to the person.
Yeah.
You can apply it to the
behaviors and
But-
communication style.
Yeah, but I think it's
Right?
best to assume the best in people,
Yeah.
and that if they're behaving in certain ways because of external factors, it's not because they were literally hardwired to be evil.
Yeah.
Now, going back to this Benjamin, we're just gonna go with Benjamin Franklin. 'Cause
Somebody can fact check that. and
Yeah.
send
He's
in
not around to call me out on it, and if anything, he'd appreciate it. So, the strategy is,
Okay.
if there's someone who doesn't like you,
Mhm.
this is the context in which it was used, but I
Yeah.
think this works for bullies too, and it's
Yeah.
related to what you're saying. What you do is you ask a favor of them. And so by asking a favor of them, and make it easy, make it something that's like would be ridiculous for them to say no to.
Like, can you hand me that glass over
Yeah,
there?
I think in his case, he said, there's this guy that didn't like him and was being mean to him. And he said, do you mind if I borrow this book of yours for the weekend? I was really hoping to read it. Right. And so the guy's like totally flustered and like
tweaking.
Okay, here's the book. And just by that act of doing a favor, essentially sort of
Treating him
compelling
as a
to-
friend.
Yeah, you compelling him to do a favor. It's in your mind, psychologically, in the bully's mind, suddenly that person becomes a friend. Suddenly, if I'm doing a favor for this person, I must have some sort of positive disposition toward him.
Yeah.
And so I think that can be really powerful. You sort
Really
of catch
good.
them off guard by asking them to do something nice for you, which is the last thing they'd ever expect.
Of course.
And what you might discover, I think, is that the bully, they chose you in the first place, right? So you're already in their minds. And so they might actually admire something about you, right?
That's
Like
interesting.
what attracted them to you in the first place.
Right.
So maybe they admire something in you and they're a little jealous of.
Right, and they don't know
Right?
how to interact
And they don't know
with
how to
you.
interact. And so this is almost like giving them an opportunity to interact with you in a way that can develop even into a friendship.
Yeah. So I think that's a great way. Just try to, befriend them, ask them a favor, and see how it goes, right? And if the behavior, the sort of toxic communication behavior still persists, then you might want to try some other things. So
Yes.
what are some other things you can do? Well,
Right. So what we've covered so far is your sort of first line of defense.
yeah. So laugh it off if you can, if
Laugh
that
it
comes
off,
naturally to
little
you.
witty banter.
Yeah.
Um,
The second one is to try to befriend them, show
be
them
kind, be
kindness.
compassionate.
Yes. And then if those two don't really seem to be helping as much or at all, then what do? Try to distance yourself if you can.
Yeah.
Right?
Distance is always good,
Distance.
right?
But what if this is somebody who is in the workplace that you're in, or is somebody who is in your sort of social group, or I don't know, wherever, maybe at your gym, and it's like they're always the person that's on that, what is that, the squat rack? I don't know. I'm just coming up with like.
What do you got
things.
against the squat rack?
No, I love the squat rack. I'm just saying, like, what happens if the bully is always at the squat rack at the time that you're at the squat rack?
I see.
I'm just trying to give the explorers some.
Yeah, some
Examples,
context.
some context.
Yeah, I get it. Well, distance actually, I think, is somewhat achievable. So let's just think about the context in which you're bullied. Rarely is a bully going to confront you in a one-on-one situation, right?
If you're alone, though, they might.
They might, but I think what the bully is often trying to do is, I feel like it more often happens in group situations where there's more people around. And so that way they like, that's where they're feeling more uncomfortable.
That's interesting. Okay.
Right?
Possibly.
In which case you can distance yourself, right? By, I just sort of
removing yourself from the situation.
Yeah, there's already a group of people there, and I think you basically leverage other people there. You just start talking to someone else.
Yeah.
The bully's confronting you, and you kind of don't really pay much attention. You sort of deflect the conversation elsewhere. But if it is one-on-one, yeah, you can't distance yourself.
Yeah.
And I think probably the best thing to do there is just keep track of it, right? Maybe record it if you can.
Keep an Excel chart of like detailed
chart.
notes right after the fact. That's
right.
really good, actually. Right.
I mean, you could literally record it. You could, if they're doing something that you really don't like, you say, let
Tell
them
them
know, yeah,
first.
let them know, yeah, let them know that what they're doing is not making you feel comfortable,
Unacceptable.
which they're probably aware of, but just telling them, I think, helps. And but keeping track of it, yeah, documenting it, because ultimately, if it's not something you can avoid, then it is something you should make other people aware of.
And then maybe report that kind of behavior
Report
to
the
the
behavior.
principal, to the dean, to the boss, to the whomever.
Yeah, if it's in an office setting, definitely. Maybe to someone who's managing you. I honestly, in my opinion,
Yeah.
before you go to the manager,
Yeah, talk to them first, right?
well, talk to them. But I'm saying actually discuss with your peers first.
Mm.
Discuss with your peers. When you go to a manager with a problem, managers like people who can solve their own problems. So if you're going to managers with a problem about someone else, you can do it, but it's not going to necessarily reflect well on you, because it doesn't look like
True.
someone who can solve their own problems.
It doesn't necessarily put that professional self
Exactly.
forward.
So I think you're better off starting with your peer group, like other colleagues of yours,
Yeah.
and letting them know about behavior. Have you seen this person doing this before? Have they done this to you?
Yeah, and in that kind of way, not like in a gossipy way. Like,
No,
oh,
no.
No,
just more so.
It's like,
I experienced something this other day.
Yeah.
That so and so was, said this to me, and I didn't really like it. Has he said something like that to you before?
Right.
Right. Sort of getting other people involved and getting a dialogue going.
Yeah.
And then they might say, yeah, actually, that person did do that to me too, and I didn't like it either. If you can go with a group of 5 or 6 people, then you can take that to the manager, and that's
different. Yeah.
Right. That's more of this is a team issue.
Yeah.
That all of us have had an issue with.
Right.
But that way you can solve it, and then maybe you can also 5 or 6 of you confront the bully and say, look, we've all sort of experienced something that we don't really like in terms of your behavior. Are you aware that you're doing this? Are you aware that this is bothering us? Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a really mature way to resolve it without being aggressive, without
Right.
being confrontational.
So
without going
basically
behind their back.
hold like a team meeting, right? And go through different
Almost like
points.
an intervention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, yeah, because look, there are different degrees of bullying, and there's different contexts that it manifests. And so that's definitely, I think, a helpful way of addressing the issue if it gets to that point. I think another way is, I like that you said. Sometimes people might not even be aware that they're doing this. Now, if that's the case, maybe you can say, look, I'd like to sit down with you for 10 minutes and I just, want to talk in person. Talk in person. Definitely do this in person.
Yes.
Don't do this over like email or Slack or Instagram. I don't know. But talk with them and say, look, I've noticed this happened a few times. I just want to talk a few things out with you. Let's, figure out, like, point out the elephant.
I like that as a
room.
step one. I like that as a step one.
Yeah.
Which is, you're saying basically confront them first. Give them the opportunity to be made aware
Exactly
that what they're doing is bothering you.
Right. And don't use like defensive language, because bullies are defensive themselves. So what you want to do is you want to use a lot of, instead of like basically blaming them, saying you, essentially pointing your finger at them, not to you. But okay, you say, I really felt this way when this thing happened, or you make it about how you felt.
Yeah.
Right. This is how I feel when a comment like that is made, or this kind of passive aggressive behavior is like, surfacing.
Right. That's very
think you
good.
wanted to talk about passive aggressiveness, right? As a form of bullying.
I think particularly as you get older, we were saying before how there's this sort of surreptitious bullying, right? Where they get more sophisticated. And I think passive aggressiveness is a version of that. And these are, it's not overt, hey, give me your lunch money. It's more so just sort of
it's like snide comments.
Yeah, kind of putting it down, not validating the things you're saying. And just, you kind of know it when you see it and when you feel it.
Yeah.
But that's, I think, just as important as the more overt bullying in terms of its effect on your psychology.
Right.
And so being able to identify it and then confront the person on it. So yeah, okay. So if the sort of earlier befriending type approaches don't work, I think like you're saying, the next approach is step one: try and confront them in person, not in that moment, but on a separate time. So if they're bullying you at the moment, you sort of bear through it, and you make note of it, collect your thoughts, and set up a time with them a little later to have that conversation. That might surprise them too. They're not sure. They'd be surprised that you set up a time to talk.
And on that, make it a neutral space. Like, don't make it in their office or your office.
Right.
Make it maybe, let's say if it's in a workplace setting.
Coffee.
Exactly. Yeah. Go to the coffee shop right across the street.
Or the
go into the
or
canteen, or book out a room. Sometimes you can book out office spaces, but make it neutral.
Yep. And so you have that conversation. And then if the behavior continues after that, that's when I think you probably want to reach out to your peers. And have a conversation with them, see if there's repeated behavior that they've experienced as well. And if so, then you confront the bully as a group, in a constructive way. In
a constructive way, talking it through.
Not a threatening way.
No, and this is about conflict management, right? We have a video about that, so check it out. I'll link it below. And
then finally, if even as a group, you guys are not able to solve it, that's when you go to, an authority. And sort of express your concerns. And at that point, it's possible the bully is just not going to change their behavior, but the hope is that the person above can actually essentially remove them from the equation, whether that's taking them out of
whatever that looks like,
the job, or whatever it is, moving them to a different department. I mean, ideally, if someone's that problematic, they leave the company. So I think these are all great ways to solve the bullying situation. But the other part of it that we were discussing is just, how do you, in the moment, cope with the sort of the act of being bullied? And I think that comes down to what we were saying at the beginning, which is how it's bullying if you let it be bullying. If you let it bother you. And so instead of taking what they're saying personally, you just frame it in a context that probably makes more sense for why they're saying it. Right? Understand, like, what's the motivation here? Why are they saying this?
Is there any truth to this? Is there a nicer way of saying the same thing? Right, that I can turn into a lesson, a teachable moment, or whatever.
Yeah, because chances are they don't really mean what they say, or if they mean it, it doesn't really matter, right? The reality is, if it's not going to change the way sort of you go about doing things, then it's not even worth paying attention to and taking seriously. And look, it's kind of like, I would almost treat it like a TV show. You watch a TV show and people are saying intense things, and that's the TV show. That's not reality. And
I like that.
The bully is just treated like a TV show. It's like, oh, look, that person's saying something that might be offensive, but it has nothing to do with me.
I love that. That reminds me of another sort of, I think this is Stoic too. And they also find it in Buddhism as well, dissolving the ego. So not letting it get to you at all, because it's not about you. Like, it's not you. And I think it comes into having this notion of self-concept. And I think that was Goffman's term for it. But the idea here, Irving Goffman, I have a video coming out about something.
Goff.
Anyway, he talks about the presentation of self in everyday life. And the idea is that we're actors, similar to what Shakespeare said, right? Life's a play, life's a stage. Anyway, so you can sort of think of it as, that's not you, because you know who you are. You have your self-concept. So what they're saying is, like what they would say on a TV show. It's a TV show that you're not a part of.
Right. And that has no bearing on reality. Yeah. That's a huge part of it. The more that you know yourself, the more that you're comfortable with who you are and what you stand for and what's important to you, the more resilient you will be in a situation where you're being bullied, because regardless of what they say, you know who you are, and what they're saying just doesn't.
It doesn't align with who
Yeah.
you know yourself to be. You know what? It was really funny. Not that funny, maybe. I don't know. Funny in that it relates to what we're talking about today. So
Interesting. It's really interesting.
yes, enlightening. I was listening to a podcast, and Adam Grant,
Yes.
professor at Wharton Business School. Did you ever have him as a professor at Wharton?
I didn't.
Okay.
It was very hard to get into his classes, and so I allocated my points elsewhere. But I did see a few talks of his. He was really impressive.
Remarkable guy and so humble. Anyway, he has this exercise he does with his students, and I don't remember the exact like what he calls it, something really nice and catchy. If I find, I'll put it in the show notes. But the point of the exercise is, and he has all of his like master's students do it, his business school students, all of his students have to do this exercise. And essentially what it is they have, so you have to ask people that you're close to that know you well. Basically, they have to tell you a moment that they saw you be your best, a moment that you were, your best self. And they have to send it in to you, so through email or whatever. And you have at the end, maybe like 10 of these. Your job then is to go through all of these reports on your immaculate behavior. And you have to then find the common theme.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's where you do the work.
Right.
So you see the sort of the common thread.
Right.
And in what situations this arose, in what sort of environments you were like this knight in shining armor, this Amazon in shining armor. I don't know, whatever.
They don't wear armor.
Yeah. Okay. No, they do.
They do? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress. But the point is that you have all these nice things about you, and then you have to see, like, what is it about yourself in that situation that, you were great.
Right. And that's
cool.
something
I
that
love that.
You can also use that, and this is probably part of it. You can use that as like a pillar of strength, so that when you're being attacked, you can remember, well, actually, this is something I'm really good at. And you can just thinking of, knowing what you're good at and knowing who you are, I think just gives you that stability to sort of let everything
slide off of you. It doesn't stick to you.
Yeah.
Because you're rubber.
Well, that's probably a good place to wrap things up. I think there's really two parts to the bullying situation. One is sort of fixing the problem, right? So creating situations, making basically the bully aware of it, avoiding the bully if possible, but otherwise making the bully aware of it and trying to resolve it that way.
Right.
And then the other part of it is just sort of being able to cope with the bullying in the moment.
Exactly.
And that has a lot to do with what we were saying.
Right.
Knowing yourself and maintaining sort of this impervious sort of position where what's going on around you doesn't affect the way you feel and who you are. Yeah. Exactly.
So again, this is something that to continue working on. It's a process, and just make it a good moment.
Yeah.
Teachable moment.
Exactly. You view it as something that makes you stronger, something you learn from.
Exactly.
Which is a good policy for most things in life.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you in the next live.
Next live, we'll be in a different continent, in a different climate.
Yes.
But the same people, the same smiles, and hopefully the same good advice.
Which we take ourselves.
Yeah.
Like all of these things are.
Yeah, this is stuff that we do.
Yeah.
So hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah. So the thing is, practice what you preach, but we preach what we practice, right?
Both.
Both. Anyway, we try.
Absolutely. We do.
It's a journey.
Yes,
Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Happy
Thanks for joining us,
everyone.